What are the two biggest newbie things, beginner things that I see people do when they write a research proposal? So I've had a lot of experience. I'm 20 years into the profession. I was an engineer. Now I do research at a business school. I do a lot of stuff and thinking about all sorts of different domains, from sociology to psychology to what happens in markets. And the reason why I do that, because we have to think like that in business school. We have to think all sorts of different things. So what is it with research proposals that people often do, the two biggest newbie mistakes, errors that everybody does, including myself? I did this, and I probably was most enamored with the second one. The first one is thinking that you simply just have to have some sort of tool in your tool set that is going to create a good research proposal. That you simply have to use ChatGPT. Just go onto ChatGPT and ask it. I don't know if you've actually used AI. It's kind of dumb. Like, it's not that great. It's like talking to a person that is essentially like in third grade, where they just repeat to you. I use AI all the time. I'm building the reciprocity project, trying to build AI into it to make sure that we can create non-rejectable research papers and grants. But the idea is that it parrots back to you. It's not that smart yet. So what you tend to do and think that it's just a simple tool that you need to get, that it's one tool. Either you need to learn this type of regression or this type of methodological approach, or maybe it is, I'm going to do qualitative analysis or whatever, right? Like, I'm going to pursue something in this way. I'm going to learn how to do experiments in this one way, and I'm going to be the expert in this area. It turns out that when you actually do research, that is not the case. You don't become an expert in a particular area in the way that you think it is, because you get dragged into all sorts of different areas and people ask you all sorts of interesting things. When I do quantitative research, a lot of people want to know about evidence behind what I actually do, and they're right. So I have to often go get qualitative stuff. So it's not one tool that you will ever get at that is actually going to help you. At the end of this, I'm going to hopefully give you some really good advice in terms of making a research proposal. Now, the second thing with this, the second problem that you face is you think you can network your way to a good research proposal. If you get, and I was probably really, I had this thought early on, and you have to be very strategic and networky, and it turned out to be icky and yucky, and I don't like myself for that, right? Like, it's not something that I want anybody else to do, because that was what everybody was told. You network, and you find the right person that's for you, and you simply just have to identify by strategically networking with different people, and your life is going to be all set up and it's going to work out in your favor. And there's lots of people that do that, and that's a fantastic way to be successful in a very, very short amount of time. Now, what you don't realize is that this career is a career. It's based on doing things for a long time and having really good ideas for a long time. So I do recognize that there is an effect that if you get good ideas, it kind of compounds on each other. But there's a premise, there's an assumption that you have. First of all, is that you repeatedly have good ideas. That's very difficult to do. And then the other thing is that other people want to interact with you. And when it becomes transparent with what you're actually doing, and everybody understands what you're doing, and it's very painfully clear when that happens, that it doesn't make other people want to actually work with you. Because really what you're doing is building reputation, legitimacy. You're building something about yourself where you're a curious mind, that you're humble, that you like to work, that you really just want to be somebody that people want to be around in terms of the ideas that they're sharing and thinking about. And, when you do this networky kind of thing, all of that goes out the window, because the first time that happens to somebody and they recognize that there's a transaction involved, that they don't feel good with it. And they don't feel any, they just don't have a good feeling. And the transactiony stuff, particularly in our academic career, yes, it will get you to where you want to go to very quickly. And maybe you'll make a whole bunch of money, and that's fantastic. But is that somebody that you want to be when you're old and gray? Or do you want to be somebody that is just naturally attractive to other people? And that's a strategy that you have to choose. That's something you really, really have to think about in terms of who you want to be. And both are equally fine. Both will lead to success in the long run, and you'll be equally just fine by doing both of them. I have learned to be a lot more natural with who I am. I've learned to, just accept myself for who I am and what it's about and where I came from. And, not try to hide as much about what I'm about, and try to say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to build this platform, the reciprocity platform. Man, it sucks. And I do this every day trying to build it so that other people can benefit from it. Do I get credit for it? No, not really. It's not that big of a credit thing at this moment. Do I get all of the sort of benefits from it, and was it expensive and a waste of my money? Yeah, absolutely. All of those things. But I'm becoming more myself, because now I can openly admit these things and talk about them. And I'm trying to be as honest and open as possible. And hopefully that helps out with other people. Now, what do I do in terms of a research proposal, in terms of finding something, right? So you're going to be inundated with the newest things, and some things are really exciting, and there's going to be, either great people around that you want to work with, and it's very enticing, right? We all want to be loved. We all want to be recognized. I know those feelings very much so, right? Like, that's why I often talk about them. So what do? You pursue the things that you think are just naturally interesting to you. And I know that's very difficult. And sometimes that might be something that happened 500 years ago. And in a business school, when somebody says, I'm going to study something that's 500 years old, people say, well, that's old. And that is the point. It is old. There is something that's going on. Or I'm going to study something that is not state of the art. I'm actually just going to use really basic statistics, for example. And that is going to be my thing. That's how I'm going to illustrate what I'm going to do. Now, all of these things that are non-conventional, they tend to be a little bit harder of a strategy in terms of where you want to go to. And it's harder because it requires you to convince other people. It requires you, and not convince, it requires you to figure out how to resonate with other people. If you just simply say, I'm going to study something that's 500 years old, nobody is going to care. But if you say something, I'm going to study how business was conducted in Istanbul 500 years ago, and it has this real direct implication to how we actually understand social media today, or how we understand what goes on with the world around us, with global politics today, I think a lot of people would be interested. So it's up to you to figure out, how do I get this resonating? And so you have to think about it for a long time in terms of what you're going to do. And ultimately, there are a lot of moments that you are going to do something and you're going to realize, like, nobody cares. The whole thing is nobody cares. But you have to simply live with yourself while nobody cares about that particular thing, and be okay with that and love yourself. So that's where you have to detach, right? Doing a good dissertation proposal is learning how to detach from what you're actually doing and actually doing the work, actually getting it down, and trying to convince or trying to, I hate that word, trying to resonate with what people are thinking about, right? So if you want to study something in a particular area, you can't just stubbornly say, I'm going to study this thing in this particular area and it must be great because I'm going to study it. No, you have to say, well, how are other people thinking about it? Why don't I start where they are thinking? Why don't I begin with those moments of where they're thinking? And that's actually how you find really interesting, very cool ideas. Because if you're thinking about it differently than what everybody else is thinking, you have to figure out how and why you're thinking about it differently. And then put it within the context of what everybody else is thinking. So the most of your proposal, the most of what you're actually doing work on is actually going to be what everybody else is thinking. 80% of what you're doing is going to be what everybody else is thinking. But then you have to figure out, how do I communicate with what I'm doing, and it's so weird and different, so that it resonates with everybody else, so that they can say, oh, I get it. I get why understanding how business is conducted in 500 years ago in Istanbul, why that's actually important. I want you to think about this as all totally different than how you understand it. It is completely different, and it's really thinking about, how do I fall in love with more of who I am? And then how do I communicate this thing that I'm in love with inside with other people? That is a different story, that has nothing to do with the latest technology, that has nothing to do with networks and all that kind of stuff, but it's falling in love with this thing inside and turning that around where you are so in love with it. Everybody else sees what you're doing and they naturally gravitate towards what you're actually doing. It's a long run play. It's probably a little bit more difficult and you're going to experience a lot more struggle. But what you'll realize when you do this for a long time is that that is the gift. That is the struggle. That is the beautiful thing, is that you struggle with ideas for a long time until it becomes something that you love and everybody else loves. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.